Poor young girl let a strange man and his son stay for one night, unaware he's a millionaire. CEO, who? "Back away from the door," Lila shouted, her voice tight with fear as she gripped the fire poker with both hands. "Please," came a man's voice from the other side, muffled by wind and snow. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just need shelter for my son." Lila's heart pounded. Through the frosted glass, she could see the silhouette of a man, broad-shouldered, hunched over something smaller. A child. Snow was whipping around them in thick sheets. Her fingers tightened on the doorknob. "I don't let strangers into my home," she snapped, "especially not men." There was a pause. Then came the voice again, lower this time, more desperate. "I understand. I would not ask if I had a choice. He is sick. He is freezing. We just need one night out of the storm." Lila hesitated. The cold had already crept through the old wooden panels of the cabin. The electricity had gone out an hour ago. The fireplace was the only thing keeping the living room from becoming an icebox. She glanced at her cell phone. No signal, no one to call. Just her, and now, them. She peeked through the peephole again. The man shifted slightly, revealing a small boy curled in his arms. The child coughed violently, the sound sharp, painful. That did it. With a groan of protest from the old hinges, Lila opened the door. Snow blew in instantly, chilling her ankles through her socks. The man stepped forward just enough for her to get a better look. He was tall, soaked from head to toe, hair plastered to his forehead. The boy in his arms had his face buried in the man's coat, body trembling. "Get inside, quickly," Lila muttered, stepping aside. "Thank you," the man said with a nod, carrying the boy inside. She shut the door behind them and bolted it. "Sit by the fireplace. Don't touch anything else." The man obeyed, gently settling the boy onto the old couch, unzipping his own jacket to wrap it around the child instead. Lila watched cautiously, still clutching the fire poker. "Your name?" she demanded. "David," he replied. "And this is Eli. He's 6. He has a cough, probably the flu." "You think," she scoffed, "you're walking a child through a blizzard? That's beyond irresponsible." David looked down, brushing wet hair from Eli's forehead. "We had nowhere else to go." She hesitated, then turned to the kitchen. "I have dry towels and instant soup." "That's it." He nodded, murmuring his thanks as she returned with the towels. He took them gratefully and began patting the boy dry with a father's quiet care. Lila watched from across the room, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hated this. The intrusion, the memories. A year ago she had trusted someone who knocked on her door with kind eyes and lost nearly everything. Now this stranger was in her home, and yet, "Why are you out here anyway? There's no one for miles. The storm's been on the news for days." David looked up, his eyes a dark shade of tired. "I was trying to get Eli to his grandmother's house 2 towns over. The roads closed behind us. We got stuck. Then the car died." She studied him in the firelight. He looked ordinary, not dangerous, not entirely honest either. There was something behind his gaze, something he was not saying. But the boy... Eli coughed again, weakly. Lila exhaled sharply and went to the kitchen. "Chicken noodle it is," she muttered. Minutes later she brought 2 steaming mugs to the fire. David thanked her softly. She handed the child's mug directly to him, sitting on the far edge of the room. The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Just the crackle of the fire, the occasional clink of the spoon against the ceramic, the wind howling outside. Eli drifted into sleep, head resting on David's lap. Lila stared into the flames, forcing herself to stay alert. "You don't have to be afraid," David said quietly. "I'm not afraid," she replied, though her voice trembled. "You're letting 2 strangers into your home. I'd say you're brave. Or maybe foolish." She smirked slightly. "I'd say the same to you," David chuckled under his breath. It was the first time the room felt less cold. "One night," she said firmly. "By morning, the storm should ease. Then you leave." David nodded. "One night, that's all we need." She looked over at the boy's sleeping face, then back at the man who held him so gently, and for the first time in a long time, she wondered if opening the door had been a mistake, or the first right thing she had done in ages. The wind howled outside like a restless spirit, rattling the windows of the small cabin. The power had gone out completely now. The fire in the hearth flickered with quiet defiance, casting golden shadows on the walls. Lila lit 2 old candles she had stashed in a kitchen drawer, their flames trembling as she placed them on the table between her and David. The soup had cooled slightly, but the warmth lingered. Eli had only managed a few sips before drifting back to sleep in the cocoon of coats and blankets on the couch. His breathing was still uneven, but slower now, steadier. Leela sat on the floor near the fire, her knees tucked under her, hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. David sat across from her, his own mug in hand, his face partially illuminated by the firelight. He looked less imposing in the candle glow. Human, tired, but calm. "She loves chicken noodle," he said after a long pause, nodding toward his son. "She?" David chuckled softly. "Sorry, habit. His mother. She passed a few years ago, but every time I made chicken noodle soup for Eli, I always said it was because she would have too." Lila glanced at the boy, her features softening. "He's sweet. Polite. I try," David said, then looked down. "He's all I've got." There was a vulnerability in his voice that made Lila shift slightly. She wasn't used to that. Most men she had met, especially the ones who showed up in the middle of storms, carried secrets behind charm, but David wasn't trying to impress her. He was just here, and honest. "I'm sorry about his mother," she said. "Thank you." He met her gaze, and for a moment the fire crackled between them like a bridge being slowly built. Lila stood up. "I have a clean blanket in the back. I'll grab it." She walked down the hallway, past the creaking wooden floorboards, into her linen closet. She paused when she reached for her softest blanket, the one her grandmother had quilted years ago. It was white with tiny blue flowers. She rarely used it, kept it folded neatly at the top of the stack. She sighed, then took it down. When she returned to the living room, she stopped short in the doorway. David was seated on the floor beside Eli. The child was half asleep, moaning softly. David, unaware of her presence, dipped a cloth into a bowl of water, then wrung it out with care. With slow, practiced hands, he pressed the cool cloth gently to Eli's forehead, whispering to him so quietly, Leela couldn't make out the words. The cloth. It was hers. One of the last clean white hand towels she had. She kept them tucked away, separate from the others. She watched as David rinsed the cloth again, wiped Eli's cheeks, then carefully folded the towel and placed it beside the bowl. Then he stood, walked into the kitchen, and washed the cloth thoroughly before returning it to its spot, folded just the way she had stored it. He never saw her watching. Lila looked down at the quilt in her arms, then slowly stepped back into the room. "Here," she said gently, handing it over. David turned, slightly startled. "This is beautiful." "It's warm," she replied, "and clean." He took it, his hand brushing hers briefly. "Thank you." She sat back down by the fire, but this time a little closer. For the first time in a long time, the room felt full, not just of people, but of something else. Of presence, of peace. As David settled beside his son again, adjusting the blanket over the boy's small frame, he looked over at Lila. "You didn't have to let us in," he said softly. "I know. You didn't have to feed us, or offer your best blanket, or pretend not to be scared." She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not pretending." He smiled, faint but real. "Still," he said, "thank you for everything. I won't forget this night." Neither of them said anything after that. The fire crackled, the wind howled, but in the heart of the storm the little cabin glowed softly, and for one night warmth won. The snow had not let up. By morning the world outside the cabin was buried under a thick white silence. The roads were invisible beneath the storm. Trees groaned under the weight of snow, and even the faint tracks from last night had vanished. Lila stepped onto the porch, wrapped in a thick coat, and stared at the sky. Nothing but white. "They're saying the county might not plow the roads until tomorrow," she said as she re-entered the cabin. David looked up from where he was feeding Eli spoonfuls of warm soup. "Then we're stuck?" She nodded. "Another night at least." He met her eyes. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault," she said, though her voice carried a touch of weariness. "Let's make the best of it." That day, they settled into a rhythm neither expected. David volunteered to chop firewood, swinging the axe with clean, practiced force behind the cabin. Lila, surprised at his strength and precision, watched from the window before turning back to the kitchen. She made fresh dough for biscuits and started a pot of homemade chicken soup, the scent of thyme and garlic filling the space. When a leak sprung near the back door, David patched it with tools he borrowed from her old shed, climbing onto a shaky chair with careful hands. He fixed the hinge on the bedroom door without asking and reinforced the coat hook near the entryway, smiling when Lila raised an eyebrow. "You're handy," she noted. "Years of fixing what I couldn't afford to replace," he replied. Eli's cough persisted throughout the morning. His forehead felt warm again. Lila didn't hesitate. She brewed ginger tea with honey, cooled it to a safe temperature, and held the cup for him to sip. She dampened a cloth with lukewarm water, checking his temperature with gentle fingers. When he became restless, she brought out a faded, well-loved teddy bear from a box in her bedroom. She sat beside him on the couch, whispering stories as she dabbed his cheeks. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured, smoothing his hair. "We're going to get you better." David, watching quietly from the kitchen, said nothing, but his jaw clenched. He was used to doing it all, being mother and father, protector and provider. Watching Lila tend to Eli with such tenderness stirred something deep in him. She had no obligation, no reason, yet here she was, kneeling on the hardwood floor beside a boy who wasn't hers, singing softly under her breath while wiping sweat from his brow. Later that afternoon, while Lila went to fetch more blankets, David stood at the door to the bedroom and watched. She was sitting on the floor next to Eli's bed, his small hand cradled in both of hers. She was humming, a lullaby, maybe one from her own childhood. The teddy bear was tucked beside him. Her golden hair fell forward as she leaned over to press her hand to his forehead again. Every gesture was full of care, of presence. David's throat tightened. He turned away before she could see the way his eyes stung. That evening, as the wind howled outside and the cabin glowed with firelight, the three of them gathered around the living room. Lila told a fairy tale, something about a brave girl who tamed a snowstorm with nothing but kindness. Her voice danced through the room, and Eli clapped when she finished. David made animals out of folded paper scraps, his attempts clumsy but endearing. Eli giggled as a paper moose with lopsided antlers tipped over. Then Eli pulled out a small notebook and some colored pencils Lila had given him. He drew furiously, tongue sticking out in concentration. When he was done, he tore out the page and held it up proudly. "This is you," he said, pointing to a golden-hazed figure, opening the door. The drawing was of a snow-covered cabin. A tall man and a small boy stood outside. A woman, Lila, opened the door, golden light spilling out behind her. He taped it to the wall with a strip of leftover wrapping tape. "This is my second home," he declared. Lila stared at the drawing, unable to speak. David looked at her, not with gratitude this time, but with something deeper. The way her fingers brushed Eli's hair, the warmth she poured into everything she did, her quiet strength. He smiled, and for the first time in a long, long time, he felt the fragile, frightening beginnings of something he had not let himself feel in years. Hope. The storm had passed. The sun rose weakly behind clouds, casting a silver-gray sheen over the snow-drenched trees. Lila stood at the doorway of the cabin, already dressed in her thick coat and scarf, work boots crunching lightly on the porch. The air was still sharp with cold, but manageable, enough that the roads might finally be plowed. Inside, David and Eli were still asleep, curled together on the couch, breathing softly in the early morning light. Lila hesitated at the door. She wanted to say something, anything. Ask if they would still be here when she got back. Offer them another night. But the words felt heavy in her throat. This was her first shift in days. She could not afford to miss it. So she left the fire stoked, extra wood by the hearth, and a small note on the kitchen counter. Back by 4. Make yourselves at home. By the time she reached the town's diner, where she worked part-time, her thoughts had drifted constantly to them. Every time the bell above the front door jingled, she looked up, but it was never David, never Eli. And when her shift ended, she practically ran to catch the shuttle back toward the mountain. The sky was turning orange by the time she made it to her cabin. The porch was quiet. No footprints in the fresh layer of snow, no giggles from inside. Her heart sank. She pushed the door open. The fire had burned low, but was still alive. The blankets were folded neatly. The dishes in the sink were washed and drying. The room was clean, almost untouched. They were gone. A sharp ache bloomed in her chest. On the dining table lay a piece of folded paper, weighed down by something small and sleek. She approached slowly. The paper was cream-colored, lined faintly. Her name wasn't on it, but she knew it was meant for her. She unfolded it. Thank you for the warmth, for the kindness, for reminding me that people like you still exist in the world. I'll never forget it. There was no signature, just a line below, scrawled in softer, almost hesitant handwriting, "You helped more than you know." Beside the note sat a black card. No name, no bank name, just a single, small chip and a strip of numbers. She picked it up, heart thudding. It was heavier than a regular credit card, sleek, mysterious, a black card. The kind only the ultra-wealthy carried. She stared at it, stunned. Confusion flooded her first, then disbelief, then something she could not quite name. She set it down slowly and sat on the edge of the couch, where David had sat the night before, telling stories to his son. Her fingers tightened around the note. He was gone. Without a goodbye, without an explanation, without her getting to say what had begun to build inside her chest. She had not expected it to hurt like this. She thought she would feel relief, space to breathe, her house returned to her, but instead, she felt a hollow throb, like someone had opened a door in her heart and slipped away before she knew they had entered. Her eyes burned. The cabin was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, Lila cried. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the ache of missing something she had never expected to find, and not knowing if she would ever see it again. The next morning, Lila stood in line at the only bank in town, the mysterious black card clutched tightly in her coat pocket. Her breath fogged up the glass doors as she waited to be let in. The entire way there her mind had waged war, one side screaming to use it, the other holding fast to the one thing she had always clung to: pride. When her number was called, she approached the desk with hesitant steps. "I found this," she said, placing the card gently on the counter. "I just want to know who it belongs to." The teller gave her a strange look but typed in a few digits. After a few seconds, her eyebrows lifted slightly. "This is a private account," the woman said carefully. "No name attached publicly, high-tier status. I can't disclose details, but whoever gave you this must trust you very much." "I don't want the money," Lila said quickly. "I'm not here to use it. I needed to know." The woman nodded slowly and slid the card back across the counter. Lila left with more questions than answers, and she tucked the card away in a drawer, unopened, untouched. Days turned to weeks. Snow began to melt. The wind softened, and the nights grew quieter. Lila went back to her routine, patching up the cabin, working at the library 2 days a week, taking extra shifts at the diner when she could. But everything felt dimmer. The echo of laughter from that stormy night stayed with her. So did the image of a dark-haired man sitting by the fire, making paper animals for his son. She found herself waking in the middle of the night, staring at the door, half expecting to hear a knock. Then, one Monday morning, everything unraveled. She arrived at the small-town library only to find a sign taped to the door. Closed indefinitely, funding eliminated. Inside, her supervisor was boxing up the last of the books. "I'm so sorry, Lila," the woman said, barely able to meet her eyes. "Amy pulled the plug on rural locations. There's nothing we can do." She walked home that day with numb legs. Every step felt heavier than the last. 2 jobs gone in under 3 months, no family, no backup, and the bills were already piling up. By the end of the week, her woodpile was dwindling. The refrigerator was half empty, her savings account dipped below $20. She tried selling crafts online, even her old typewriter, but nothing stuck. The silence in the cabin grew heavier with every passing day. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, slipped under her door in a thick cream envelope. Her name was written by hand, in elegant, deliberate strokes. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single-page letter, printed on fine letterhead. "Dear Miss Lila Thompson, we are pleased to invite you to a private interview for the newly established Community Outreach Program within R&E Holdings. We are seeking individuals of rare character, strong values, and demonstrated compassion. Your name was personally recommended. Please arrive at our downtown office at the time below. Travel arrangements have been made on your behalf. Sincerely, David R., Chief Executive Officer, R&E Holdings." Her hands trembled. She read it again and again. David. She sat down hard on the edge of the couch, the same spot where he had once sat beside Eli. She pressed the letter to her chest, breathing deeply. He remembered, and he had found her. She did not know what this interview was, or why now, or why, after all this time, he had reached out. But one thing was certain. Her story with David was not over yet. Lila stood in the lobby of the gleaming glass building, the polished marble floors reflecting her boots, still speckled with mud from the mountain road. The ceiling stretched high above her, trimmed with golden light, and the people around her moved with quiet purpose in sleek suits and crisp heels. She felt like a stranger in a foreign land. Clutching the invitation letter in one hand, she approached the receptionist. I have an appointment with R&E Holdings. My name is Lila Thompson," the woman finished, smiling warmly. "Yes, we've been expecting you. Please, take the elevator to the 32nd floor. Mr. Rivera will meet you there personally." Lila blinked. "Mr. Rivera?" "Yes," the receptionist said, already dialing something on her headset. "He's the CEO." She stepped into the elevator, heart pounding. The number above the doors ticked upward. Each floor brought back a memory. Eli giggling beside the fire, David handing her soup, his voice thanking her in the quiet of a snow-covered night. When the doors slid open, the space before her was quiet, elegant. A woman in a navy dress gestured politely and led her to a large, glass-walled office, and there he was. David stood near the window, tall and composed in a charcoal suit. His back was to her, but as she stepped in, he turned. Their eyes met. Time for a moment paused. He smiled. Warm, steady, familiar. "Lila." She took a breath. "David." He stepped forward. Hands relaxed at his sides. He looked the same, but different. Stronger somehow, more in control, but with the same quiet kindness in his eyes. "I was wondering if you'd come," he said. "You invited me," she replied, her voice soft. "I hoped you'd say yes," he said gently, then gestured to the small sitting area near the window. "Please, sit." She lowered herself into the armchair, gripping the sides slightly. He walked over to the nearby shelf, pulled out a flat folder, and handed it to her. Inside was a single piece of paper, a child's drawing. The cabin in the snow. A tall man, a small boy, and a blonde woman opening the door. Her eyes widened. "You kept it," she whispered. "I took it," David admitted. "That morning. I knew Eli would want me to. He called you our angel that night. I wanted to keep a piece of what that night meant." She looked up at him. David sat across from her now, leaning forward. I didn't tell you who I was. I didn't plan to show up that night, but I've spent the month since trying to figure out how to repay something that can't be repaid. Lila shook her head slowly. I didn't do anything extraordinary. You gave us shelter, dignity. You gave Eli warmth and safety when we had neither, and you gave me something I thought I had lost for good. He paused. Hope. She didn't speak. Her hands tightened around the drawing. David continued, his voice steady. I used to think the only way to build something lasting was through power, control. But you reminded me what real strength looks like. Quiet, brave, kind. I created a program. Community outreach, education, rural aid, all of it rooted in that one night. He stood and walked to his desk, retrieving another folder. And I want you to lead it. Lila blinked. Me? He nodded. You've lived it. You understand what it means to give without expecting anything back. That's the kind of leadership I want. She looked down at the folder in her lap, then back at him. Her voice trembled. This isn't about money, is it? David smiled. No, it never was. She looked at him, this man who had once sat beside a fire in worn boots and flannel, who had now offered her not just a job but a place in the story he was still writing, and she nodded. I'll do it, she said. Not for the title, not for the office, but because in his eyes she saw something she hadn't seen in her own reflection for a long time. Purpose, and because she believed him, not just as a CEO, but as the man who had once whispered thank you in the dark and meant every word. The weeks that followed moved with a quiet rhythm, but each day wove Lila and David closer together. Their new program under R&E Holdings, named the Open Door Initiative, focused on offering long-term shelter, job training, and childcare for single parents and the homeless. The foundation was built around the principle Lila had unknowingly embodied the night she opened her cabin door, that kindness without conditions changes lives. In every meeting room, every site visit, every late-night email exchange, they stood side by side. They debated fiercely, David, pragmatic and results-driven, Lila, empathetic and fiercely protective of every voice. Sometimes they clashed. But they always listened, and always by the end found a path forward that held both integrity and heart. Lila had never felt more seen. Each morning a coffee waited on her desk, exactly how she liked it. 2 sugars, no cream, cinnamon on top. David never said anything about it, but she noticed, every time. Some nights they worked late into the evening, reviewing proposals, talking through complicated logistics. Other nights he would walk her out to her car in silence, their shoulders occasionally brushing in the darkness. Still, no words about what was growing between them, just looks that lingered, and gestures that meant more than either dared to say aloud. Then came the gala. A high-profile event, hosted at the company's flagship site, a converted warehouse now serving as a state-of-the-art transitional living center. Donors, press, city officials, and nonprofit leaders filled the room. Lila, in a simple navy dress, gave a speech about the night everything changed, about firelight and soup and a boy with a fever. She did not mention David by name, but the moment she stepped off stage, a reporter cornered her. Some say your sudden rise within R&E is due to personal involvement with Mr. Rivera. Can you confirm or deny that your role is tied to favoritism? Lila froze. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled slightly, but she held her ground. I was offered this position based on... She never finished. David stepped forward, calmly but with purpose, his voice even as he addressed the small crowd that had gathered. If I may, he said, placing a steady hand on Lila's back. Then, without hesitation, he took her hand gently in his own and turned to the room. The woman standing beside me changed the direction of my life, he said, voice resonating with something deeper than defense. When I had nothing, no power, no title, she offered me and my son shelter without asking for anything in return. He looked at Lila, and something flickered between them that silenced even the most skeptical reporter. She didn't see a CEO, or a man with influence. She saw two people in need and opened her door. He turned back to the crowd. Everything we've built here was born from that moment. And if this company has done anything good since, it's because of her heart. Silence fell, then applause. Lila looked down at their joined hands, still warm, still steady. She had no idea when he'd reached for her, or why her heart felt like it might break from something too full to contain. Later that night, when the lights dimmed and the guests had gone, they stood alone in the center of the room. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. David looked at her, eyes soft. "Yes, I did." And for the first time, he didn't let go. Winter returned gently. The snow drifted down like silk, covering the fir trees and winding roads with quiet grace. At the end of one such road stood the old cabin, no longer forgotten, now lovingly restored. Its bones were the same, its spirit intact, warm, humble, waiting. David had invited Lila and Eli for the weekend. After a year of working side by side, building shelters, launching programs, learning each other's rhythms, it felt right. Still, Lila had not known where they were going until the final turn. She gasped when she saw it. The cabin stood like a memory made real. Her boots crunched on the freshly sanded steps. The front door still creaked. Pine and cinnamon lingered in the air, just as she remembered. And above the mantel, carefully framed in glass, hung Eli's drawing of a golden-hailed woman opening her door to a man and his son in the snow. "You kept it?" she whispered. David smiled softly. It was the first place Eli called home again. The weekend unfolded gently. They cooked together in the small kitchen, now bright with laughter. Music hummed low from speakers David had installed. Eli ran from room to room like he had always belonged there, asking if they could stay forever. That night, after dinner, Eli fell asleep on the couch beneath the same quilt she had once wrapped around him. Lila stepped onto the porch, arms crossed against the cold, watching the snow fall. David joined her silently. After a long pause, he turned to her. "Will you come with me for a moment?" She followed him to the steps, where warm light spilled from the cabin behind them. He reached into his coat pocket and knelt down, not in a grand hall, but on the very spot where she had once opened her door to him. He held out a simple silver ring. Inside the band were 6 small words. "Thank you for opening the door." His eyes met hers. "I used to believe I didn't deserve a family," he said quietly. "That what I lost couldn't be found again. But you changed that. With your hands, your heart, you made room for us when no one else would." Her eyes filled. "I won't promise perfection," he continued, "but I promise to always keep the door open for you, for Eli, for whatever we build together." He held the ring out, his hand trembling just slightly. "Will you open it? One more time? This time for a lifetime?" Lila did not answer with words. She knelt beside him, wrapped her arms around him and held on, like she had once done with his son. Not in fear, but with love. A small sound broke the moment. Eli stood in the doorway, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Miss Lila?" "Mom, you made Dad smile like the first night," David laughed, holding Lila closer. She wiped her eyes and looked at the boy who had unknowingly stitched their lives together, then at the man who had finally come home. The snow continued to fall around them, soft and silent. No grand crowd, no diamond flash, just one door, once opened in a storm and never closed again. Sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings come from the simple act of opening a door. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness matters, that love can arrive quietly, and that second chances often come wrapped in snow and silence, then we invite you to be part of more moments like this. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales of hope, love, resilience, and the small choices that change lives forever. Let your heart be reminded, one story at a time.